Welcome back to the Manor. Julian McBain here, and today we are talking about the middle class problem. As always, we'll be swunting Panleons while we do this. I know some of you are probably disappointed about Merry Mayhem, but as I said before, it's just not cost effective this year. It is what it is. So before we get started, before I get into the intro, the middle class problem is something I've discussed in another video, and I wanted to bring it up and reiterate it here. I've kind of refined things a little bit on it, and I want to focus in on not only the problem, but some of the solutions, and some of the solutions that I have been using to climb out of the middle class problem. Not all of these solutions are going to work for everyone, and more importantly, they're not short-term solutions, or I should say they're not quick solutions. So keep that in mind as we go through the middle class problem and things that you'll want to think about if you yourself are suffering from the middle class problem, or if you're climbing up from the working class or the working poor into the middle class, things to watch out for so you don't fall into the middle class problem. So, okay, before we get started, if you're new to the Manor, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, please consider going to patreon.com/JulianMcBain if you want to support my work. If you do, you'll get exclusive content, some of it more structured like this, some of it a little more frivolous. So, for instance, this month on Patreon, I just released a video of just playing war robots and screwing around, but there's also a video that will be going up this coming week that is more refined pieces and more thoughts about the content discussed in the previous week. So these are all things that if you're interested in them, please consider going and becoming a member. Okay. The middle class problem. Many people flow into and out of the middle class every year. And actually the same is to be said about all social classes. There's a lot of social mobility, particularly in the West. And the thing about that social mobility is most of us don't think about what it means for our lives as we move up and down the socioeconomic ladder. I know people who have started out with nothing and gotten all the way up into the fairly wealthy, and people who started out wealthy and ended up with nothing. And the people at the top and the people at the bottom cycle. Now, of course, the lower you get, the bigger the pool is. So the absolute, or the percentage of number of people that move through those areas is smaller, but the absolute number of people is likely relatively the same. Actually, it also grows the further down you go. So that churning is what keeps money moving through the system. And that's a very complicated topic, so we're going to kind of avoid that all right now. But when you think about the socioeconomic ladder, you want to avoid thinking about it as a monolith. It is not fixed. It's very easy to assume it's fixed because the percentage of people in each layer of the socioeconomic ladder is relatively static. However, the individuals within that layer changes frequently. So something to keep in mind. So that being said, many poor or working class families will move into the middle class as they get older. As you get older, many things happen. You start earning more money, you get better jobs, you get raises at jobs, you get promotions, you start to manage your finances smarter, better, you get smarter about how you deal with life. And so as all of those, as you grow in your life, you will slowly climb the socioeconomic ladder. It is very common for people who are poor or working class to end up in the lower middle class by the time they're reaching retirement age. Unfortunately, that oftentimes has them going the other direction after they retire, depending on how they did things when they were younger. However, as you get into the middle class, you start to run into middle class problems. And if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of money, those are problems you likely are thinking that you'd want to have. Sometimes they're okay to have, and sometimes they're not so okay to have. It's really easy to screw up at the beginning when you're getting into the middle class and creating the middle class problem than if you're well developed in the middle class and you run into the middle class problem, because you'll have more tools and more experience on how to deal with it. Socioeconomic movement mobility is often more frequent and relevant in cities or suburbs, more urbanized areas, because there's more people. A lot of your rural towns, you will grow in the socioeconomic ladder in an absolute sense. But a lot of people don't see it because people in rural areas just live their lives. And I'm not saying that to say there isn't relevance when you're in a rural area, but part of the thing that creates the middle class problem is trying to keep up with the Joneses. And yes, to a certain extent, people in rural areas suffer from this just as much as people in cities, but it's not as visible. Jim got a tractor, I need a tractor too. You know, those things happen. Seen it happen. Also, when it comes to middle class, farmers, as a general rule, will never be considered below middle class, because while they may be cash poor, and they may even need to be on public assistance from time to time, they have wealth in the one asset that is hard to get rid of, which is their farm. And while that is changing in the last couple of years, there's been a real move to centralize farming and eliminate small farms, which is unfortunate. The fact of the matter is those that are keeping their farms have an asset that is fixed, that is wealth that is hard to get rid of. And so they will also suffer from this problem, but it's in a much different way. So as a general rule, farmers can use the information I give, but for you it's going to be different because you have that asset to work with. And farms generally are a fantastic asset to have if you've got the mindset to be a farmer. Because you don't want to buy a farm and just sit on it. Then it's not a farm. Then it's a waste of your money and everyone else's time. Okay. Let's define the middle class. Since we've been talking about it, let's actually come up with a definition for our purposes of the middle class. And this is by no means the definitive definition of it. Well, that's what it's supposed to be, but this isn't necessarily what everyone's going to call the middle class, but for our model, let's use this. Bills are always paid, as a general rule, month to month. And what I mean by that is the money's always there. That doesn't mean you remember to pick up the phone. I know some people with real money who forget to pay their bills. You own your home or you rent by choice if your credit is good. You may not be able to own your home because your credit is bad, but you have the income to support a mortgage. Or alternatively, depending on your living situation, an apartment that suits your lifestyle rather than something you compromise on. Let's put it that way. You're never short on money unless some sudden unexpected expense comes up. So if month to month everything goes fine, you're never afraid about making the rent or the mortgage. And up and down the middle class, you're going to have at the lower ends of the middle class where rent is the only real option depending on where you live. And at the upper end, then you can make the choice whether you want to or not. But for our definition, the possibility of owning a house is within reach. Now, maybe you don't have a down payment yet. It may be that there's a localized socioeconomic problem or a global one that's temporary, like the 2008 downturn. That may not make that possible, but as a general rule, your household would be able to do this. And again, this is not a set in stone definition. This is what we're working with for this idea. There are going to be plenty of people that don't necessarily fit this definition perfectly, that are middle class, myself included, but that doesn't mean that, but for the purpose of this conversation, we need something to work with. So that's what we're going to work with. Here's the thing. All of that is predicated on no outstanding debt. So, if you had no outstanding debt, could you pay a mortgage? In all likelihood, the answer is going to be yes, if you're in this class. So that's your non-mortgage debt. If you had no non-mortgage debt or non-capital debt, so let's throw a car payment in there and not count that too, then would you be able to make a mortgage? If the answer is yes, then you're definitely in the middle class. for the purpose of this conversation. Here's the problem with people in the middle class. Often heavily leveraged. What does that mean? Lots of debt. And this has been a problem for generations, because the idea is, as you climb, as you get more money, as your income goes up, you want things. And this is especially true if you've been poor. You want things because before you couldn't afford them, and now you can. And so you don't want to go without, because you remember what it's like to go without. And so oftentimes you'll find yourself heavily leveraged. You're deep in debt. $10,000 to $15,000 worth of credit card debt on average is the American citizen. Yes, $10,000 to $15,000 on average is the American citizen. And then debt to income ratio is often above 60%. Now, you're making all your bills. You can still afford to have Christmas. Things get a little tight if an unexpected expense like needing new tires or car repairs comes up. But you're doing okay. You've got the income to cover it. But it's not a great place to be in because you're overloaded on debt. And so the problem with is when you live on debt, you get used to living on debt. And the more you live on debt, the less you're going to have the older you get to live on if you ever wanted to retire. When you're so heavily leveraged, forget retirement. Retirement's not even an option for you because you're going to have to continue to pay down that debt as you get older. So, and let's talk about different types of debt. There's bad debt and there's good debt, and there's bad uses of debt and there's good uses of debt. Okay? First off, what is a good debt? A good debt is anything that involves an underlying asset. Okay? We're going to get into this more when we talk about debt in general and credit ratings and debt to income ratios and stuff like that. But any debt that has an underlying asset, like a house, right? That's a good debt. 1, the house secures the debt. 2, interest rates on secured debts like that are often much lower. 3, at the end of the day, the debt will be paid off and you still have the asset. Cars work the same way. The downside to a car versus a home is the car depreciates over time and you don't have any control over that. And if it's a brand new car, you're upside down on the debt for most of the life of the debt. That being said, if something goes pashay, in all likelihood, you could sell the car and pay off the debt with the proceeds from the car. That's how that can work. Other good debt. Let's go into not good and not bad. Student debt. Student debt is neither good nor bad. It is what it is. The benefit of student debt is it allows you to go to college. The bad side of student debt is you can never get rid of it unless you pay it off. It's often way more than you should be taking on. And the jobs you're going to get right out of college will barely service it. I tend to place student debt in the bad debt column. The underlying asset they give you is the knowledge necessary to get specific jobs. So there are jobs that you may want that are going to require college. For instance, if you want to be a doctor, you need to go to college. If you want to be a psychologist, college. If you want to be any of these hard sciences or even softer sciences professions that really requires that kind of an education, okay, fine. If you're going to college to go to college and just get a degree, don't. That drives you straight into the middle class problem for the rest of your life. Look at the trades. Seriously, look at the trades. You'll earn more over the course of your lifetime. You'll end up shelling out less in debt. And even though they may be dirty, there's a shortage of people right now for them. If you're a young person, you're going through high school, you don't know what you want to do, and you're thinking about going to college, just kind of float through and get a degree, don't. Go get an apprenticeship. It'll serve you better in the long run. Hand to God. Another bad debt, and everyone's going to roll their eyes, but this is true, is credit cards. And this is the primary driver of the middle class problem, is credit card debt. Like I said, $10,000 to $15,000 per individual in credit card debt. That's your average in the middle class. That means that a couple may have as much as $30,000 in credit card debt. Do you have any clue how much in payments a month that is for credit card debt? On average, that's like $700 a month. That's rent in a lot of cities for a one-bedroom. No, that's not true anymore. That's rent in a lot of towns for a one-bedroom. Cities, you're lucky if you can get away with less than $1,200 for a stack impact economy, which is disgusting. So, okay. What if you're already there? Restructure your debt. Work with a financial professional, your banker, to figure out how you can restructure your debts to get them paid off. I've mentioned David Ramsey before. He has a really good system. I've mentioned the disagreements I have with him, but it works. Another thing you can do is you can refinance debt. If you can keep your debt to income ratio low enough, you can refinance your debt into, say, a personal loan. So if you got a lot of credit card debt, say $10,000 across 4 credit cards, so you're making those minimum payments, right? You're not making any real progress on those credit cards. They're specifically designed to be like 35-year loans. That's how a credit card is designed, because a credit card is not meant to be used for long-term debt. It is to be used for cash flow. We're going to get into this when we talk about credit cards here in a couple of weeks. So what you do is you refinance them into a personal loan. Benefits of a personal loan over credit cards: lower interest rate, almost guaranteed. Fixed terms, which means you pay the loan off over time and it's gone. 3, 4, 5 years, that debt will no longer exist. And as long as you're not stupid and take out that damn credit card again, you're not going to wind up back on the same problem. 3, your revolving credit will be more open, which raises your credit score. Revolving debt has the biggest impact to credit score of anything. And the problem with credit scores is it's the credit score that affects the price of literally everything else. So, and if you're watching this within the 12 months of it coming out, now is the time to restructure, especially if you're in the US, because the Fed has already said they're going to raise interest rates in the next 12 months 3 times. And 0.75% is a lot of money when you're talking about debt. Don't take my word for it. Go talk to your banker. If you've got a lot of credit card debt, sacrifice the 8 points on your credit score. Talk to your banker first. Sacrifice the 8 points on your credit score and try to restructure the debt now. Now is the time before they raise them. Money's never been cheaper. It'll probably never be this cheap again. Okay. There's another thing about the middle class problem you should know. Some states limit your career options if you're suffering from the middle class problem. Listen to that again. Some states prevent you from entering certain careers or heavily restrict you in them if you suffer from the middle class problem, particularly the finance industry. If you suffer from the middle class problem, there are certain licenses you may not be able to get, or if you can get them, you'll be under extremely tight restrictions on using them for a number of years at the very least. Now, if you can find someone to support you through that and you can get through those years, it's 100% worth it, because oftentimes those professions are the ones that are going to carry you out of the middle class problem and out of the middle class altogether. But they're hard to find. So keep that in mind. If you're climbing the socioeconomic ladder, you're moving into the middle class, and you're like, great, I have a good credit score for the first time in my life. I got a good credit score because I haven't been using credit very much, but I've built it up over time. I have the income now to support myself. I want to get that big TV. Watch it. Think things through. And no, the TV is not going to kill you, but it never stops with the TV. You get the TV. then you get the speaker system, then you get the entertainment center, then you get the video games, then you get the computer. This is how it builds up. And sometimes it's hard to overcome. But before making that purchase, if you stop yourself and say, okay, is this something I can wait and save up for, as opposed to putting it on debt? Is it an absolute requirement? Is it a significant increase to my quality of life? Or is it just something I kind of want? If it's in that third category, put the credit card down. It's in the second category, see if you can at least split the difference. Save up half of it, put the other half on the card, and then pay the card off. If it's in the first category, if it's something you need for life, deal with it. Pay it with the card, pay the card off. But don't go on a spending spree. That prevents you from getting into the middle class problem. So, the middle class problem will affect many people throughout their lives. Maybe even all of them at some point or another. Even if they don't realize that's what's going on. It's something that you want to think about as you're moving up and down that ladder to make sure you don't end up hitting a ceiling that you can't make it through. Because once you hit that ceiling, it hits hard. Kind of hurts on the noggin. So, as you structure your... And for many of the people watching this, you're already well into your adulthood. But particularly if you're a teen or in your early 20s, this is something to keep in mind. The financial planning lessons that you're getting watching these videos, talking to your financial experts, maybe even in school, are tools to help you not fall into this trap. And more often than not, the people teaching them to you are those who have suffered from them or are currently suffering from them. So, and that's not a whine. That's experience. And the guidance given, when given from a position of experience, is often more, it makes it more real. So, okay, that's all I got. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. And as always, I really appreciate the support, and we'll see you in the next one.